Hello, and welcome back to Bumblebee, where today we travel to an empire lost and never forgotten for the top 10 messed up facts about the Aztecs you never knew. It was the colonialists that started the term Aztec. They referred to themselves as the Mexica, and they went from a ragtag band of refugees that was literally exiled to a swamp to an all-powerful superstate in just 300 years. And we're gonna start by correcting another incorrect assumption. They were actually defeated by disease, not the Spaniards. Come on guys, you gotta give them more credit than that. I mean, Cortez tried to invade them an easy 3 times and just kept failing and failing. The only reason their invasion of the Mexica ever succeeded was the other indigenous clans in the area were so sick of them, they joined the Spaniards to wipe them out. And the Spaniards contributed so little to that battle, they only lost about 100 soldiers. So even if they had defeated the Mexica by battle, it wasn't even them who got to say that they really did. Meanwhile, 200,000+ indigenous people, Mexica or otherwise, perished that day. In reality, Mexica actually had a strong chance of beating the Spanish, if not for the smallpox they contracted from the Europeans that wiped out a mass majority of their populace, especially their leaders. It's extremely unlikely they would have ever fallen. The amount of harm caused by European diseases on a worldwide scale was tremendous. Shout out to not showering and being scared of hygiene, you nasty MFs. It's estimated that over 20 million Mexicas died in just a period of 5 years alone. Worst part is, it's not even like they were going to a heavenly place after death. Mexica believed in a nightmarish afterlife. Well, for some, let me explain. While most afterlives are froofy My Little Pony crap that rewards you unconditionally, the Mexica believed how you died determined what afterlife you received, and there were 4 categories you could fall into. The warrior's afterlife showed exactly how much the Mexica loved war. If someone died in battle or was sacrificed to the gods, their souls would go to the west afterlife, which involved more war, helping one of their gods fight against darkness to ensure the sun would always rise. The afterlife of the east was for the other type of warriors, women who passed carrying a child or during the birth of it. They were treated similarly to fallen soldiers and sacrifices, and they helped prepare the sun for its journey into the underworld. In the south was an afterlife for people who died because they were struck by lightning, drowned, or died from some kind of sickness. In that afterlife, there was plenty of food and comfort. Finally, the north, called Mictlan. It was for people who died ordinary deaths from like old age, and in the afterlife, their souls had 4 years to pass through 8 levels of challenges. The 9th level was where their soul finally found rest. So yeah, wild stuff, but remember it for context in some of the later segments. Speaking of wild stuff, how about some messed up Gaga fashion? Since, to quote, makeup and paint are things that the light women use as shameless creatures according to one source, you can imagine the women here weren't repping that colonial style of 12 layers of poison powder on their faces. But some Mexica women stained their teeth red with the crushed bodies of cochineal insects to make themselves more sensually appealing, which multiple sources say that Mexica men didn't actually like colored teeth, so I guess makeup isn't always for you, is it, fellas? Companions of warriors often rubbed yellow wax or earth all over their face and body, dyed their feet, and painted their hands and neck with intricate designs. That the fellas liked. Some women who worked in temples dyed their long hair with a red hue and their teeth black. They'd also etch complex designs onto their bodies. Priests painted their bodies black or covered them with ash. Black and gray were associated with the wisdom of spirits. Speaking of fellas, their unique beauty side was lip plug. The size and shape of the piece placed in the slit of their lip indicated the warrior's success. Earplugs were also a trend, but for both sexes, and now for wannabe goth 14-year-olds trying to piss off dad. Sometimes you just want to get rid of the feeling of someone on your skin. Well, the Mexica believed you could wash them off. Upon the death of a loved one, Mexica would often enter states of deep ritualized mourning. For instance, the death of a merchant would mean that his family was plunged into an elaborate days-long ritual to mark his passing, such as mourning screams. For widows, mourning their husband could get frankly pretty gross. A Mexica woman mourning her husband lost to war would enter an extraordinary 80-day period of grief. During this time, she would not wash her face, head, or clothes. The accumulated filth expressed her deep emotion during the time it took for her husband's spirit to reach paradise. If you remember point 2, you'll know it takes hella long for souls to get some peace. After this time, she was to get up, clean herself off, pull up the big girl pants, and having ritualistically washed the evidence of the sorrow off her body, move on in life, find someone new, and start over, homegirl. Kidnap someone or you're a loser is a literal real thing for the Mexica. Even though biology decides when the ball will drop and you become a man, to the Mexica, a boy wasn't a man until he had captured another person in literal battle. Till then, guess what, wimpy? You're a disgraceful child and everyone will make sure everyone else knows it. It starts at age 10 when your parents drag you outside the apartment with the trimmers and buzz you bald, except for a tuft. Tuft could be placed anywhere, so depending on how much your parents hate you, the spot could be pretty stupid. From then on, you're forbidden from cutting that tuft until the day he defeated and returned an enemy to the empire. Didn't mean he couldn't grow throughout the rest of his hair, but that one stupid shame tuft is always gonna be sticking out so that the mean ass girl you had a crush on could destroy your spirit by shouting, "Is it a stinking tuft of hair? Thou art not a woman like me?" As a result, it was fairly common for the boys who were only supposed to be carrying supplies at the battlefield to rush into the heat of battle and try to find someone to capture. More often than not, those boys ended up dead, but if they survived, they'd come home as heroes. And if they die on the field, well, the soldier's afterlife ain't that bad, as you know. And what did they battle with? Why, only the worst weapon imaginable. Each ancient Mexica weapon was unique and used for a specific purpose, as Mexica warfare was highly organized, complex affair steeped in ritual and tradition. The most devastating weapon used by the Mexica warriors was the Mexico, which means hungry wood. Oh yeah, hardcore. While the Mexicas were advanced in many ways, one technology they didn't develop was foraging, so they had no metal weapons. So obviously they were using something stronger. And no, it's not aliens, for Christ's sake. The flat oak wooden panel of the Macu was embedded with razor sharp slivers of obsidian, which is 12 times sharper than surgical steel, and you had the option of being one-handed or two. They were about 3 to 4 feet long and wide, and a two-hander could be even bigger, and you swung them in a dragging motion. Apparently the weapon was powerful enough to decapitate a human from Mexica texts, and according to the report from invading Spaniards, a Mexica warrior even used one of these to decapitate a horse in one blow. So they tested on the television show Deadliest Warrior, and it lived up to the test. This one dances the lines between messed up and actually kinda sweet. It's taken to the shield. So, the Mexicas have often been mistaken as highly patriarchal, as they are, well, dominated by war in its mentality, which is presumed to be the domain of men, especially historically. But though most soldiers were men, sacrifice and battle are central to the ways that Mexicas viewed the world. So Mexica women's lust could be openly enjoyed and expressed within marriage, and they were able to marry at age 16, not a single damn day before. And as someone who talks about history, I think it's the first time I've said that to this camera. But what makes women so unique in this culture is that once they're married, mothers and warriors are seen as equals. Mexica culture had a beautiful notion that women were also warriors, battling to capture a baby, heralded as soldiers returning from the war having taken to the shield. And it wasn't just a metaphor. Dying during childbirth earned privileges in the afterlife equivalent to dying on battle or on the sacrificial stone, as mentioned in point 2. Women who struggled with fertility were not seen and punished for it, but rather the strongest of them all. As soldiers continue to return from battle, she continues to fight nature. This parallel between warriors and mothers reflects the balanced gender expectations. The Mexicas believed that men and women played specific but different roles that were equally essential for the success of their city. Thus, both sexes had importance and effectiveness, but in very different spheres. So from the perspective of invading colonialists, they may not be messed up to us, but to them, straight F. Want to know what is messed up? Ferocious Gods require praise 24/7 if you don't want to get smoked. Why? Because the Mexicas believed that the beginning of the 5th age of the world, their new age, was delivered by the gods' heroic sacrifices of themselves. Their spilt blood brought humans to life, created the sun, and gave energy to the moon. And so a blood debt has been born, and only human blood and hearts could keep the sun moving and save the world from extinction. So you're not trying to piss them off. Priests were straight up taught to alienate their loved ones, conditioning them to perform rituals precisely and unquestioningly under extreme stress. AKA, when you get asked to sacrifice your homeboy, you gotta be unbiased. Ooh, another, nobles use cactus spines to lance their earlobes and also to bleed themselves in pyramid shrines as offerings to the gods. When the Aztec forces, Mexicas, were on the campaign, a wife would rise at midnight, conduct a precise series of rituals at home and in the temples to ensure his success. Not kidding, but sweeping was one of those rituals, apparently helping control the world's filth, keeping cosmos in balance, and ensuring the favors of the gods. So what am I telling you? That in a spiritual sense, the Mexica fully believed that it was this domestic space on the home front where battles were believed to be won and lost. So you better be getting up 8 times a night, sacrificing hearts as a community, and sweeping if you want to bring home that gold. You've heard don't drink the Kool-Aid. How about don't eat the stew? Pozole is a traditional stew that includes pork, garlic, and corn product known as hamay. Look at that. Don't you want to lick the screen? The modern name is a variation of the original name, the spoken language of the Mexica and their descendants today. The Mexica themselves would have eaten what they called, I can't pronounce it, but it's the same dish. The most important staple was corn, a crop that was so important to Aztec society that it played a central part in their religious beliefs. You guys knew that this was going to might come up eventually, but I'm actually going to be saving that sacrificey stuff for the next point to address the specific cultural practice of this one. This is the one night you might want to break out "I don't feel hungry" excuse as a kid, especially if you saw dad coming home with a captive from his recent battle. Once said captive is dealt with, a portion would be delivered to the Mexica who had captured that sacrifice. The stew was pre-prepared since dad had time to get home and be like, "Hey babe, guess what? Takeout tonight," beforehand, and then when that portion was delivered to the household, well, someone would be put in the stew and served. The capturer himself was forbidden to eat it, however, his family would. So dad's just sitting there awkwardly at the head of the table watching everyone eat what's metaphorically the fish he just caught. The one you've definitely been waiting for, protein deficiency. Summer of 1521. Cortez has once again his handed to him by the Mexica and had to flee. From the lakeshore his men watch as 62 companions are hauled up to the shrine platform for all to see. Here they are made to dance with a form of fan in front of the Mexica idols before being laid down and sacrificed, their still beating hearts lifted from their chests. Bernal Diaz recounts that story. Cortez, alongside him and a few others, lived to be the only Europeans to see human sacrifice by the Mexicas. The Spaniards successfully invaded and destroyed the empire in the nature of greed shortly after. We know for a fact that religion demanded more human sacrifices than any other faith in history, a minimum of 500 to 800 each year in order to appease the gods. But anthropologist Michael Harner also proposes the theory that the growing population's effect on fauna could have contributed to the decision. Maybe some sacrificed weren't because the gods asked, but because people were starving and others volunteered themselves for the cause. Mexica were sacrificed just as much as their captured enemies were. After all, if you remember from point 2, you get a pretty decent afterlife. So, their integrity solved farming and land resource issues, but it can't conjure up protein. Whatever the reason is, this is the route the Mexica took, and it's been largely ignored and covered up in historical information, whether consciously or unconsciously, until more recent years. It's likely due to embarrassment for nationalistic reasons, but also out of a desire to portray indigenous peoples in the best light possible when we already face so much bigotry and assumptions as is. Ironically, both these attitudes represent European ethnocentralism regarding man-eating behavior, a viewpoint to be expected from a culture that's always relatively been abundant for livestock, meat, and milk. Always. In the end, the Spaniards' whole excuse occurring the Mexica has always been the basis of preventing human sacrifice, but in reality it was a series of unprovoked attacks on the Mexica leading up to the massacre, purely because of the gold they had. They didn't know about the sacrifices till later. So ask yourself, why is the Mexica seen as so evil for sacrificing then? Killing or dying for religion isn't even close to abnormal. Look at the Crusades and the Holy Wars, really any slaying in the name of the Bible and other religious texts, and how we managed to rationalize it. Why does history do so for colonialists who oversaw the erasure of these indigenous peoples worldwide in the name of religion and greed, and dub them as men of their time, yet condemn the Mexica for doing way less than what they did? It's the same words, different font. New circus, same monkeys. You get the picture. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something new. There's a lot of misinformation on the Mexica floating around, so be sure to comment below if this is something you want to learn more about. Like and subscribe, and peace for now.